Assalamualaikum and good greetings. So today we'll be watching a video titled Jesus a Nazarene question mark Bible Contradiction number 6. So this is a continuation of me watching a series of videos with regard to Christianity. Without further ado, let's watch.
Supposed Bible contradiction: Matthew's prophecy versus Old Testament prophecies. Matthew closes his birth narrative of Christ by saying, "And he went and lived in a city called Nazareth, so that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled, that he would be called a Nazarene." However, there is no Old Testament prophecy where it says the Messiah will be called a Nazarene. So where did Matthew get this prophecy from? Well,
Matthew is one of the gospel, right? One of the books in the gospel. So this is history about Jesus, right? So meaning that gospel is stories about Jesus. It's like his story about Jesus, right? Stories about Jesus, not necessarily what Jesus conveyed to the disciples, correct? Because and he went and lived, unless this is something told by Jesus himself, and then the author of Matthew conveyed from a third person that listened to the story or something.
there are a few ways of handling this. The first is to claim Matthew was citing an oral tradition, since he used the word spoken and not written. However, this is unlikely since at times Matthew used the same word for other Old Testament prophecies that were written, and there is no evidence for this being an oral prophecy of the Messiah. But it is possible. A more likely possibility is Matthew is not quoting a specific Old Testament passage, but is referring to a collective theme taught by various...
Wait. This is about who? What and why is it related to Old Testament? Because Old Testament is before Jesus, right? Is the issue here is that anything from the gospel should be priorly prophesied, otherwise it's a problem. Is that how it works? Because I'm confused about what's the initial issue to begin with.
various prophets. To be a Nazarene was not looked on as a good thing by the Jews. Nazareth was not a place of high praise. John 1:46 says that Nathanael asked, "Can any good come out of Nazareth?" It is likely the term Nazarene for the Jews.
But that's from what? John? John is New Testament, right? So that's come after, right? I'm not sure whether this is about Nathanael is a figure before Jesus or something.
Nathanael asked, "Can any good come out of Nazareth?" It is likely the term Nazarene for the Jews was not just a term of origin, but a term for one from that area that was despised. It would be like calling someone from the South a Southern hillbilly. It refers to their origin, but it is also used to insult them. Second, look at what Matthew says. He doesn't say it was spoken by a prophet, but spoken by the prophets, plural. It seems that Matthew was referring to several Old Testament passages that speak of the Messiah being despised by others.
In that case, okay, because I'm still trying to understand what the Bible is and what the gospel is, etc. Right? And I've tried to absorb what some of you have commented and tried to educate me on this. But if Matthew, an author of a gospel, when he says something, it is from the Old Testament, meaning doesn't that become a secondary source? Meaning some of what he's written is a secondary source because he's referring to something that is he read from passages from Old Testament. So that part of gospel is that as well, meaning that combination of message of Jesus, stories of Jesus that is absorbed from somewhere, hence it becomes secondary source by nature, by default. But Christians do take gospel as primary, right? Or is also do Christians take gospel as secondary as well, meaning that the gospel can be a secondary source that it takes from something else.
And using the term Nazarene because it carried that despised meaning for his Jewish audience he was writing to. In the same way, if I called someone a Southern hillbilly, A foreigner might think I was referring to their origin, but to us, it would also have been used as a term of despise and insult. So Matthew may just be referring to Old Testament passages that talk of one being despised, and using the area Jesus came from as a way to show this. Another interesting possibility, given by Dennis Bratcher, is Matthew is referring to Old Testament passages that say the Messiah will be a branch. For example, Isaiah 11:1 says, "There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit." In Hebrew, the word for branch is netzer, which is the same order of the three primary letters for Nazareth, and some scholars argue Nazareth is derived from netzer. So Matthew may be using the root meaning of Nazareth to refer to how the prophets referred to the Messiah as a branch.
Is this due to translation issue? In Nazareth, Nazar, and actually is referring to branch rather than a place.
As Bratcher says, although he was certainly not exegeting Isaiah, he was identifying the obscure Galilean town of Nazareth, in which Jesus grew up, with the Old Testament reference to a netzer, that God would raise up to bring justice and righteousness and peace to his people. This is Matthew's way of confessing Jesus to be the Messiah, but he is not doing it historically or geographically, as we so often assume, nor is he simply connecting predictive prophecy with its later fulfillment. He is doing it theologically, by using the similarity in sound between a word in Hebrew and a word in Aramaic. So Matthew...
So these are possible explanations about the issue to begin with, right? Nazareth, Nazarene, and meaning that the issue is not resolved, but there are several possible explanations. Is that what I can capture from this? Meaning that there's this possible explanation that this is taken from there, or this explanation where actually this, linguistically blah blah blah, like this.
You may be using a play on words to show that by Jesus being a Nazarene, he was also the branch of Jesse. Either way, Matthew never claimed to be citing a specific prophet, or directly quoting something word for word from the Old Testament. It is more likely he is paraphrasing a collective teaching about the Messiah among the prophets, and using a cultural play on words. Thus, this supposed contradiction can be resolved.
So he's paraphrasing. So that's interesting. Meaning that I don't remember whether I have noticed this about gospel before, but it actually is, meaning the author gather information, including from other scripture, and then use his own way to convey certain things. That would mean, because of course, as a Muslim, I'm always try to relate what in the existing Muslim scripture, etc., that this can be related to, and because I try to always understand what is a gospel, etc., compared to, because previously I always thought it is closest to the hadith, where for example Prophet Muhammad SAW lived like this, etc., said this, etc., and then the companions, the Sahaba, relay what is what they heard, what they see, etc., and that is essentially hadith, right? So gospel I always thought as such, but if this is the case, because it's not primarily from observing Jesus, is taken from previous scripture as well, and then reformulated by the author to convey and use play of words, etc. It's more of like Ibn Ishaq. Is it? Because Ibn Ishaq still, I think those earlier writers of Sirah, they still have to include something in terms of the source, right? Because for the others to re-evaluate what they have collected, because their primary role there is just to collect everything and then list up where this is obtained from, so that the later people can evaluate each of the story. It's not lost, it's documented, but it can be re-evaluated in terms of authenticity, etc., right? But in this case, because the possibility, and we do not know what actually Matthew or the author of Matthew is trying to do, there's a possibility as described in the video. So it's more likely like like a seerah without the narration, right? It's like a weak seerah or something. Or, but seerah is still about prophet. So what about the? Is it like it's an Israeliyat? Yeah, but it's interesting to me. It is interesting because before I learned anything, I thought the Bible is parallel to the Quran, but when I learned about it, it's not. Of course, it's normally, generally speaking, more parallel to the Hadith in terms of what it claimed to be, right? And what Hadith claimed to be. And then when we go further detail, I thought, oh no, only Gospel is like the Hadith. The rest is more of, Sirah writers, etc. And then now Gospel in itself is also not parallel to Hadith. It's more like a Sirah, etc. That is interesting. What do you think? Feel free to educate me if I miss anything. Thank you for watching. See you next time.